Hello Hastings, I'm Tom Wright, and welcome to another In Studio. I have the privilege and honor of welcoming to our studio Mr. Jamie Ford, a New York Times best-selling author, and 2 thumbs up means 2 million copies. That's what that, 2 million copies sold of this book right here, Hotel on the Corner of Bitter and Sweet, on the New York Times best-selling list. #1 in Norway. You were mentioning that #1 in Norway for 4 months.
Yeah, I actually knocked Stephanie Meyer off the #1 spot.
Way to go!
For a brief moment in time, and then she came out with another book and knocked me off, and I never made it back. But yeah, Norway, which is weird because at no time was I writing that book and just pausing and just thinking, oh yeah, this is gonna rock Norway. You know, it's just so arbitrary. But it's cool.
Man. It's very
I'll take
cool.
It. Yeah.
Yes, and the reason why we have a New York Times bestselling author here in town is for Hastings Reads. I invited you here, and I just spoke this morning with the students. Had a nice presentation.
It was fun.
Yeah, so very fun. And also tonight you'll be at the Hastings Art Center, I believe. Yep. For the adults there in town, I can go check it out.
Which I heard that used to be a church, right?
Yes, it used to be a church,
cool.
renovated church. Very cool place.
I'll be speaking, signing books, absolving people of their literary sins. It'll be awesome.
That will be awesome. So, Jamie, let's talk about your book here, first of all. For those not familiar, what is Hotel on the Corner of Bitter and Sweet? Hotel
on the Corner of Bitter and Sweet is, it's a bittersweet love story. It's the story of a young Chinese-American boy who falls in love with a Japanese-American girl during the time of the Japanese internment, so World War II. And it's also set in the 80s where the main character, Henry, is, he's older, he's a widower, and he's looking back on that time, thinking about all the things he did, the things he didn't do, kind of reconciling the past and the present.
What inspired you to write that? Where did you get the idea to write this?
You know, I'm half Chinese on my dad's side, and I had never written any kind of Asian American story, and I really hit a point in my life where I started to explore my family roots. And my dad wore a button that read, "I am Chinese," when he went to school. He would walk to school, the public school, and after the bombings of Pearl Harbor, people in the Chinese American community would get mistaken for Japanese, and he would get in fights and things like that. And so I wrote a short story really about that button, about this character that I made up, named Henry, who falls in love with this Japanese girl named Keiko. And that short story had some traction, and some editors really liked it and encouraged me to write the book. And here I am now.
Here you are now.
Book in hand. Yeah, crazy.
Interesting. So didn't you mention in your presentation, wasn't there a workshop guy that said, no, this is not going to work. It's not going to be a novel.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's a prolific author. He's a really nice guy. But he said that this is a pretty good short story. I don't think it'll ever be a book. And later I sent him a copy. He signed it. He took it all well. I speak to him every few years.
So you've sold 2 million copies, like you mentioned. You sold 2 million copies, #1 in Norway, and you're selling in multiple languages. I mean, you laugh, but I mean, this is serious, like really, really popular. It, sold in Norway, Turkey, and also sold rights language in Italy. So when you were writing this, did you have any idea that this is going to be this popular, or did you have a feeling like, you know what, I got something special here?
No, I was, my bar for success was really low. I just wanted someone to read the book and enjoy it who wasn't related to me, like my mom or my wife or something. I just want a total stranger to read the book and be satisfied. And it really took on a life of its own. Sometimes books are like our children. We have the best intentions for them, but they're going to go in a direction of their own gravity. And eventually, the characters of Henry and Keiko, they found their way to Bulgaria and Estonia and Croatia and all these places that my wife said, I really don't think you should sell the foreign rights unless you know where that country is on a map. So I got a big map, like, okay, where is Estonia? I really have a vague idea of Eastern Europe. I need to know where Estonia is. And so, yeah, it's kind of found its way into all these markets, which has been amazing. And it was never my intention. It wasn't even really my hope or dream. I really just want to get the book published and move on to the next project.
How did let's go back in time a little bit. How did writing enter into your life? Was this something you wanted to write since you were a kid, or did it come later?
My degree is in art and design, and I originally got into art as a little kid because I wanted to be a comic book illustrator. I wanted to be a comic book artist. I wanted to be the next Jack Kirby or Steve Ditko or one of these great comic creators. But I tended to have better ideas than I could actually execute. So I became an art director, which means I end up coming up with an idea and hiring an illustrator or hiring a photographer. And I had a really fun, lucrative, interesting career. But when you're working in design, or I was working in advertising, you're basically pimping your creative soul by the hour. I mean, and they pay you really well for your soul. But I'm working for my clients, and I found that in my off time, my weekends, I would start writing, just so I had a creative sandbox not related to my day job. And as I got older, and I had more things to write about, I really wanted to write more. And I started thinking maybe I could have a career if I took it seriously. And that's when I started going to writers' conferences, spending some of my vacation taking it seriously. And
About how old were you when you started that?
I was fumbling with fiction in my 20s, but it wasn't probably until my early 30s that I started applying myself with the intent to get a book published. I never thought I would write full time. I thought I would have just the day job, and I managed to leave the day job behind a few years ago. But I changed my discipline. So I would read books that just to learn. Like, okay, I'm going to pick some books that I wouldn't normally read, but I'm going to read them anyway. I'm going to read them from a writer's perspective and try to pick apart what's happening on the page, the point of view, how the story's unfolding, the order of exposition, all these, these buzzwords about how a book is constructed. But after I got my kids in bed, I would sit down at 10 o'clock at night and I'd read for 2 hours and just force myself to try and learn. And then my reading time became writing time. And then eventually I kind of figured out some short stories, and then had some encouragement from authors and editors to write a book, which I did.
And you delved into it a little bit. Tell us a little bit more about your writing process. Are you a guy that sits with a laptop at Starbucks, or are you at home, at 11 o'clock at night, 2 o'clock in the morning?
It's interesting because I see other authors and how they do it. Like Lisa Genova is a very acclaimed author, and she writes in a Starbucks. Pat Conroy used to write longhand on yellow legal pads till he had this mountain of hand long form things. I have a little office at home, and I have a laptop, and the ritual is I wake up and I wear Batman pajamas. Literally, I have like 3 sets of Batman pajamas that my wife gets me every Christmas. And I've got my dog and my coffee, and I just write at home. And I tend to write from a premise and an ending. And I have an arc of a story, and then I make up the juicy middle as I go. That's kind of how I do it.
I see. So it's not all outlined and structured, but you do have an ending.
I do have an ending. Some authors, they'll outline everything, just like they'll have like a 30-page outline. And other authors, they just go commando style. They're just going to sit down and just start writing. And I'm kind of in the middle. So I start with a point of entry and a point of exit, and I have my characters in mind, and I know where we're going, but I don't know necessarily how we're going to get there. And so the discovery process is what makes it fun for me. And I am one of those authors where I will stop my writing day mid-scene or mid-chapter so that the story still stays in my brain. I go to bed, I'm still thinking about like what's going to happen next, and I get up and I want to write, and I can't wait to get to the next scene. So once I start, it takes me a while to get going, but it's like a diesel engine. Once I get it going, I just let it run all the way. And I'll try to write 7 days a week, even if I just write a little bit on Saturday, a little bit on a Sunday. But more often than not, I get kind of obsessed about it, and I'll write late at night on a Friday night and all weekend long. And my wife calls it Storyland. I sort of submerge into this world for a number of weeks, and then I come out of it and kind of acknowledge the other humans in my life and reconnect with the real world, and then I go back to Storyland.
What is the most challenging part of Storyland?
Oh, the most challenging part. Well, right now it's letting go. Like when I wrote Hotel, I didn't have an audience, so I wasn't conscious of writing for other people. And now I'm writing, and I have these imaginary people sort of looking over my shoulder, and so it slows me down a little bit. I find myself second guessing myself, and and it takes me a while to just forget about it and just write for myself again. Now I have an editor, and there's all these people at Random House who want to know what I'm doing, and it's hard for me to kind of divorce myself of this crowd and just get back to just writing for me.
I see. Writer's block. You know, a lot of people run into that. What do you run into that?
I do.
And what are your tricks in dealing with it or preventing it?
An author friend said to me, writer's block is your subconscious telling you that what you're working on actually sucks. And it's like, thanks for your honesty. That's awesome. I'm gonna go cry in the corner now. But for me, because I have a trajectory of the story, when I get writer's block, it's when I know I've taken a wrong turn. And I'm writing and I slow down and it just feels off. And it's like if you're driving in a car and you feel like you missed your exit and you start looking around like, okay, there's not supposed to be cows here and there's supposed to be a mall there, and I'm pretty sure I'm lost now. Writer's block for me is that inkling that I've taken a wrong turn, and I fight it a lot of times because I'll write 80 pages, 30 pages, I'll have a certain trajectory that I followed, and I don't want to go back. And I'm like, I try to figure out a way to make this work. And writer's block for me is just letting go, saying, okay, dude, you just wasted a week. Just accept it. Happens to the best of us. We're going to back up, delete all those pages, and start again.
What advice would you give to any young writers out there, or of any age, writers out there aspiring to write something of their own? What would you give them for advice?
This is advice that was given to me. I'm looking at the cameras because of you out there. This is really good advice, and it's cheap advice. Go to a garage sale and buy 3 books for like a nickel a piece. The worst books you can imagine, the worst books you can find, books you would never read, and force yourself to read them from an authorly perspective, and look at them and go, someone paid this author to write this, and read it and look for mistakes, and you'll find them there. And then if you can find those mistakes in those books, you'll catch yourself making the same mistakes in your own writing. It totally works. I did this exact same exercise. I bought these books and I read them. I'm like, okay, the story should have started here, or we're head hopping in the points of view here. This is kind of lazy writing. And then when I sat down, I'm like, oh, I'm doing this. And it broke me of some bad habits.
Let's talk about your other books. You have other writings going on. You have a new book coming out in September.
September 12th. The new book is called Love and Other Consolation Prizes.
Here you go.
The new book is about a boy who was raffled off at the 1909 World's Fair in Seattle. They actually raffled off a child. I know, that was my reaction. Like,
what?
Like, what? They had themed days, and so on an agriculture day, they raffled off a milking cow. On a mining day, they raffled off 3,000 copper ingots. And September 15th, 1909 in Seattle was Washington Children's Day. They raffled off a boy who was donated by the Washington Children's Receiving Home. So no one knows whatever happened to this kid. It became a Ripley's Believe It or Not. It's one of these weird little historical anomalies, and I was always curious. And so I tried to find out what happened to him, and I couldn't find anything out. So I just made up his story. As in my story, he ends up in Seattle's red light district, and there was an interesting confluence in Seattle at the time, because it was the time of Seattle's suffrage movement, where women got the right to vote like 10 years earlier than the rest of the nation. And also it was the height of Seattle's kind of social vices, like the red light district. And so it's a story of him in this context, and he falls in love with 2 girls, oddly enough. The daughter of a madam at this place he's working, and one of the maids there. And it's kind of the 3 of their collective stories.
Wow, interesting. Great. Well, for anybody watching that's curious about your work, that book and your work, anything, and get a hold of you, perhaps, do you have a website?
Yeah, I'm on. I find that author websites, before Facebook kind of aggregated all of us into one social media watering hole, the website was more prominent. Now I spend more time. You can go to jamieford.com. That's my website. It has a tour schedule and where I'm at and all that stuff. But I spend a lot of time on Facebook, on Twitter at Jamie Ford, and Instagram.
Well, there you go. So we can follow you on Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff.
Find me.
Great. Well, Jamie, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure to meet you. Again, Mr. Jamie Ford, New York Times best-selling author here in Hastings for Hastings Reads. And so good luck tonight at the Hastings Art Center.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yes. And thank you all for joining us for this in studio. We'll see you next time.